welcome you back to another edition of the Falcons Roundtable, I guess is what we're going to start calling it. Of course, DJ Shockley, Tori McElhaney, Dave Archer. I'm Taylor Vismor, and we've got a couple things to talk about today. In the beginning of January, Falcons released Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot, and they started a full restructure of this organization. They hired Matt Ryan as the president of football. Then they hired Kevin Stefanski as the newest head coach, and then, of course, Ian Cunningham as the general manager. There's been a lot of moves that have been made in the month of January, so why not start February by kind of talking about what they've all said in their press conferences and their one-on-one interviews. Just so much information for us to discuss today, guys. So let's start with the first hiring for the Falcons, which of course was Matt Ryan, the new president of football. You guys, I'm going to actually start with you, Tori. I think there were so many questions coming into the restructure of this organization of what is a president of football and what does he do? Knowing what we know now from all the press conferences that we have had with Matt Ryan, how would you explain what this president of football job is and what he is supposed to do?
He is the authority in the building when it comes to football, when it comes to making sure that everyone is aligned in what they're thinking, whether it be head coach and the coaching staff or the front office and the moves that they're making. And so he is the guy. He's the pinnacle. He's the top of the sphere, and he's reporting into Arthur Blank. The head coach and general manager are reporting into Matt Ryan. And I actually, when I sat down and talked to him about the process and what this role was, he's like, it's a bit of a fluid thing. He even joked when we were talking to him during Ian Cunningham's press conference the other day about how I've never been in a draft meeting. I've got to go in and figure out what a draft meeting is and what I need to talk about. And so I think that this is all fresh ground for Matt Ryan. But I will say this, the point in time where I knew that they made the right decision putting Matt Ryan in an executive chair was in the first few minutes of Kevin Stefanski's introductory press conference, where he said from go, this is the vision that we have for a team. We're going to be smart. We're going to be physical. And this is a organization that is going to lean on those things. And then he goes into not only does he set the vision for what the organization is, he goes into offense, who they're going to be, defense, who they're going to be, special teams even. And I thought those 2 minutes solidified for me that Matt Ryan's the guy in charge here, and he's the one that's setting the vision, which is exactly what Arthur Blank set out for that position to be.
I think what's so interesting about this move and the new position of president of football is, like you kind of said, he's at the top, and it's kind of like a triangle now where the general manager and the head coach are now reporting to Matt Ryan. So shock for you when you see that and hearing what Tori kind of said about the press conference and what he mentioned. Why do you think Matt Ryan will be able to help this organization move forward in a positive way?
The big thing that comes to mind for me is this guy played quarterback. This guy played at a really high level. He played in his organization. He knows what this city loves. We've all seen it a couple years ago when he came back and he talked about what Atlanta meant to him or what it means to be a Falcon. And I think the biggest thing for Arch I know he'll agree with me on this. This is a guy who played at the ultimate level, but when you play the quarterback position, you're like the president. You make a lot of decisions. You get a lot of people in order. You make sure that the offense is ran right, but you got to know what all 11 guys are doing on defense. You got to know what all 11 guys are doing on offense, and you have to bring them all together. And I think he's a guy who understands exactly what it means to be a winner. He understands what it means to bring people with you. He knows what it means to have an authority about him, and he played for a long time in this league and knows exactly what he needs to get out of people. And I think the fact that he played in this league, but he also knows and has a relationship with Arthur Blank, that goes a very long way. And you think about a guy in Arthur Blank's status who has been around business for a long time, but say, you know what, this is the guy I believe can help us get back to where we need to be. And to be honest, when he came on, there was a different vibe. There was a different, you got a little bit more of hope. I know this guy. We've watched this guy. We've seen him talk. We've seen him interact with people. And he brings that aura about him, like you mentioned in the press conference. He has that kind of relatability about him. And then you get the respect of a guy who's done it for a long time in the National Football League, and you never really saw him deviate from who he was as a player, but also who he was as a person. And I think that goes a long way when it becomes being what you call an executive and running a organization like this. And like you mentioned, having the vision, I think, is number one, coming in on exactly what he wants this to look like, but also to be able to articulate what that should look like and then you see it permeate through everybody else. So I love the hire, man. I obviously played with the guy for 4 years, know what he's about, know his work ethic, know the attention to detail that he is all about. But just one of those guys that, even to this day, we're still good friends, but you root for him because of just who he is and you know what he's about.
Can I say, too, that is a very competitive guy in that seat. If there was one thing that came up, I think, time and time again in all the conversations that we had with him is how much he wants to win. He even said that there was unfinished business with this organization, and I kind of felt that. Like, this is the same guy who yelled at Julio Jones to get set in Tampa Bay. Like, this is still that guy. And I think that was permeated throughout every conversation that I think we all had with him, but also in his message to the fans. He wants to win. He wants to build something worthy of winning here.
Yeah, Arch, for you, I mean, I know that you've watched him for so long as a player here with the Falcons, but you've also been in this press conference, but then been in individual interviews with him, not just as the president of football, but in his time here in Atlanta. Why do you think he's the right fit for the president of football job?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you guys. I'm having a tough time calling the president of football.
I know, it's weird.
He's a quarterback. I did 14 years of interviews with him midweek, post-game, leading out of games. And so Matt Ryan, I just think is number 2, the quarterback. What I will say and echo what Tori said, having been around him for 14 seasons and called every game he played as an Atlanta Falcon, is there's not a more competitive dude I've ever met. Mm-hmm. And so what Tori said is totally accurate. There's also not a guy that is more attention to detail oriented than he is. The work that he put in, and it can reiterate this, I'm sure, from Monday to Saturday. I mean, it's one thing to go win games, 120 wins in his career, 49 of those comeback wins in the fourth quarter. But how about the attention to detail from Monday to Saturday to not only dial himself in, but to dial his teammates in? That's leadership. Mm-hmm. And what you were looking for is how do we move forward? Well, you need leadership. He knows what it looks like, what it smells like, what it tastes like when you win. And he took us to the highest possible level we could go. He also experienced some low lows, and so he knows what that looks like as well. So when I heard that, and I had an inkling that this was going to happen well before it did, that Matt Ryan is a perfect guy to restructure things. And Shock talked about he knows what this city feels like when it's on fire. Think about what Matt Ryan had to come into as a rookie in 2008. He came into a dysfunctional team in 2007, but remember, you had the most athletic and dynamic football player that maybe the league has ever seen in Michael Vick here as a quarterback. And unfortunately, Mike had happened what he had happened to him. And so you've got to follow that and think about him trying to re-galvanize everybody together and trudge forward together. I mean, there's a lot of things under this guy's belt that he's absorbed, that he's had to deal with, that I think makes him perfect for the job.
And I think one last thing to add to that, Arch brings up that 08 season. Mm-hmm. That was my 3rd year in the league. And Tori, you mentioned, he said in the press conference, yeah, I've never done this before. I remember coming into his rookie year, he was asking me, a 3rd-year guy, he's asking Chris Redman, guys who've been in this league, of how to become a professional. Mm-hmm. And he's not afraid to ask those questions. Like, a lot of people would be like, hey, I'm the number 3 overall pick. Have the ego. He can come in here as the president of football. I've been there. I've done it at the highest level. But he comes in humbling himself. Mm-hmm. And I think that's who he's been the entire time. And that's why he's made for the spot.
Yeah, something I love that Arch said is he knows what success looks like, feels like, smells like, all the things. He knows what it is. And he was an integral part of naming the new head coach and general manager. Let's kind of start with the head coach. Kevin Stefanski was named the Atlanta Falcons' newest head coach on January 17th, just 6 days after Matt Ryan was introduced as the president of football. I mean, Matt Ryan finished his press conference, then went straight to interviews. He was not playing around. Stefanski was the head coach for the Cleveland Browns from 2020 to 2025, was named AP Coach of the Year in 2020 and 2023, and also went to the playoffs both of those years as well. What kind of coach, I mean, I guess I'll just ask blanketly really quickly, overall, what kind of coach are the Falcons getting in Kevin Stefanski?
You got a guy that's experienced, a guy that's been around this league for 20 years and understands what it takes to win ball games in this league. And the one thing that sticks out to me is obviously his time in Minnesota. And you think about how long he was there and survived 3 coaches. Mm-hmm. That don't happen too often where you bring back a guy that has that many regime changes, but it says a lot about who he is.
Survived in advance.
No doubt,
right?
no doubt, and was able to, continue to climb his way up that ladder. But you got a guy who's been around the league, who understands what good offense looks like, but he also understands how to get the right people around you. And I think that's what gives him an advantage heading to this position is he's been around it, but he sees the kind of intricacies that will make a team successful. And he's had to deal with some ups, he had to deal with some downs, but he's also been through it and experienced that. I think helps him get to this point, elevates him to a point where, I know what I want and I know what I don't want going into this position. So you got a guy who's highly cerebral, understands the game at the highest level, but also will get the guys ready to go and understands what it takes to be in this position. And been a head coach before, so he understands this role as good as anybody.
Yeah, to Tori's point, the survive and advance, and good reference, the Jim Valvano reference, and God rest his soul, Jim, with the NC State Wolfpack and survive and advance in the college basketball tournament. I love that. He did that. Assistant to the head coach with Brad Childress, and that opens a whole bunch of can of worms when you start talking about what he learned under Brad Childress. Childress started and cut his teeth under Andy Reid. You can start doing the things where you get back to the old West Coast offense. There's so many things you can dive into that he's been exposed to. But moving from assistant to the head coach to the different position groups that he coached, like Tori was talking about, and then ultimately becoming an OC, much like we're going to talk about with Ian Cunningham, he's touched almost every rung of the ladder as he went up. And so this is not a guy that cut corners, that was, a teacher's pet and got elevated to a role that he didn't deserve. He earned the opportunities along the way. So, but I think what you're getting, I think one of the best things I heard somebody say, he said he's the adult in the room.
Yeah.
And I think that, you think about that, that's very telling. He's going to make you accountable. There's a plan, and we're going to execute it along that plan. And I think that that's pretty cool.
Something I've noticed with Stefanski over the last couple of days of getting to know him a little bit, seeing him around the building and stuff, is that he's got a quiet demeanor about him. And I think that says a lot about who he is as a leader, kind of like what you're saying. He's the adult in the room. You walk in and you're like, okay, maybe we should all stop talking because the adult just walked in the room, right? And like you said, he kind of hit every single rung on that ladder to become a head coach. He's obviously an offensive-minded head coach, and that was one of the bigger issues for the Falcons in terms of wins and losses last year was offensive performance. So, Tori, for you, having Stefanski come in here as an offensive-minded head coach, and we will get to the OC in just a second, why was this the right decision for the Falcons?
Yeah, I know that everyone wants to talk about the quarterback position as well. They should. I understand why you want to, and we probably will, and we are going to.
It's a good position to talk
It's a good position to talk about. It's one we got to talk about. But I think that, honestly, when you look at what Kevin Stefanski has done throughout his career, I'm actually really excited to see his system partner with Bijan Robinson and kind of what he's been able to do with his line zone stuff, as well as his kind of inserting a little bit of gap back into Bijan Robinson's game. Bijan was a gap guy at Texas. So I think that there is this idea of the head coach and his system match the personnel that you already feel confident about in Atlanta. And that includes, I think, an offensive line that has a lot of veteran presence. Of course, you have so many decisions yet to make, but I think that this decision with Kevin Stefanski was the one that felt the easiest to make. And it actually was something that I think Matt Ryan alluded to when he's talking about the vision and he's talking about the team that they want to be and being an offense that relies heavily on the run game. What Kevin Stefanski was a part of with, Dalvin Cook that 1 year and then Nick Chubb the early years when he was in Cleveland. I just think that there is something to be said about how he leans on the run game and how a pass game can evolve off of it as they make more decisions as to who's going to be in the pocket.
Yeah, for the fan at home, and I love Tori jumps into X's and O's. Isn't that awesome? Where Tori starts telling us about the game.
Smile. I love smiling.
But wide zone is what you've been seeing. It's zone blocking where you all come off together as a group and we slide the second level and create some crease where the back will pick the crease to hit it. What you're doing in the gap scheme is you're creating creases in the defense. You're essentially breaking the line. You're blocking down on one side, you're pulling the backside, and you're essentially trapping the next defensive player. You're actually turning defensive players loose on the play side, having them influenced upfield, and you trap them or push them out and create creases and voids in the defense. The beauty of that is like Tori said, that's what Bijan did at Texas, and he's been pretty good in the wide zone scheme.
Yeah, I'd say so.
You'd love to be able to avoid. But the thing I love about it is, to me, that's the best way to play action. People talk about play action and why are the linebackers not coming down? If you can't simulate run in the offensive line, then as a linebacker, that's who I'm reading. And my key is the guard. If the guard steps to go to the second level, I'm coming downhill to stop the run and fill my gap. If the guard pass sets, I'm getting the hell out of there. I'm going back to get into my pass drop, right? What gap scheme does, and Tori, great job of pointing this out, you block down, 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 and you pull around, you're still going to have the same action, but it's a slide protection, and these guys replace the guys that are sliding this way, and it looks like run. So the front seven are diving to stop the run game, and now all of a sudden Drake London and whoever in the back end is running in those one-on-one or in those holes in the back end because the front seven stepped to commit to the run game. Sorry, I didn't mean to dive into the X's.
love it.
You start.
I did it. That's my. I did the first domino to fall, and I knew you'd catch me.
Well, I mean, third one's a charm. Might as well keep it going.
Go ahead.
It got me going here. You guys both talk about it. I did a breakdown of, obviously, with Tommy Rees and Kevin Stefanski, the things they do. You talk about the Y zone. Talk about the gap scheme. I literally had 3 plays where you see wide zone, you see gap scheme, and then you see counter off of it. But guess what? Every formation, the motion, the backside cutoff with the guy coming up is exactly what Arch just mentioned. And each one of them, there was some sort of crease, and they had a guy named Quishon Judkins who looks similar to our number 7, and find a little crease, and boom, here you go. You got 10, 12 yards. It looks like nothing. And then, oh yeah, let's do the same thing, but then let's bootleg it off of it. And now we got our quarterback on the perimeter. You got Drake London in the flat. You got whoever you need, but there's so many options off of it. And I think that's what makes this offense so tough to defend, one, but also the versatility of it to have so many different type of runs that look so similar, but you can do so much with it with the personnel that you have here. And I think that's a big part of it, was you got a guy who comes in, runs a similar scheme, but it fits what you have already in-house so well that when you put it on the field, it's going to look similar, but guess what? He's going to make it look real nice when he dress it up.
I know everyone wants me to talk about the X's and O's, but I'm not going to. I want to. I think everyone's got enough of the X's and O's. I will save you from that today. You brought up Tommy Rees, so let's kind of talk about him here, because something that I found so interesting about Stefanski coming in was that he named Tommy Rees the offensive coordinator and the play caller. I think in the league, especially now more than ever, if you're an offensive head coach, you're calling the plays, right? And why was it important for Stefanski to bring Rees in, and not just bring him in as the OC, but bring him in as a play caller?
So I've actually had a couple conversations with some people up in Cleveland about Tommy Rees and Kevin Stefanski and how they work together. And I think something that I have found out within that conversation, because we don't really know a lot about Tommy Rees as a play caller in the professional level. We do know what he was for Notre Dame. We know what he was in the year with Nick Saban in Alabama. But this is a guy who's only been calling plays within the NFL landscape for about half the season. Kevin Stefanski gave him the reins of the offense and the play calling, I believe it was week 10 of last season. So he has a little bit, but not a whole lot. But what I have gathered from other individuals about this decision was the fact that the relationship between Kevin Stefanski and Tommy Rees and their ability to work together, everyone who I spoke to up in Cleveland said that what they had in place in those final 7-8 games of the 2025 season was something that they both felt was a very good starting point. So it makes sense why Kevin Stefanski would come in and be like, you know what? We had something good going within a partnership. He alluded to the like-mindedness of which they have. He alluded to the trust of which he has in Tommy Rees. And I think that's kind of like him wanting the continuation of something they felt they put in place last season and not wanting to change it too much amidst all of the other changes that are in place. And something that I asked him in my one-on-one interview with him was kind of about his previous experience. You know, we were alluding to and talking about Kevin Stefanski as a play caller. He had that 2019 year with Minnesota. 2018, he was the play caller for about half the year as the interim offensive coordinator. And I asked him the question of what processes, what systems were in place in that 1 year to allow you to be successful. And he talked a lot about Gary Kubiak. He talked a lot about how he felt like he had the plate set very well for him and had a lot of support around him. And I think that's all you can want for a young offensive coordinator. And that's something that now Kevin Stefanski wants to be for Tommy Rees. And I kind of say this too, like, I'm not going to pass judgment on a play caller until I see what they can do with an individual roster of which they're performing with. Like, until I see what he does, what Kevin Stefanski does, what Tommy Rees does with Bijan Robinson, Chris Lindstrom, whoever's the quarterback, whether it be Michael Penix or somebody else, like, I want to see what happens there, because from what I've been told, there's something good brewing between those two, and I'd like to see what that is.
I think the thing you think about most is having a guy that is like-minded. And you mentioned it, having a guy who thinks similar to what you. And I think it gives Kevin Stefanski a little bit of a comfort zone to know that this guy has the same kind of processes as I do. He goes through the whole how we want to get to certain things similar to how he does. And I when you started talking, I correlated to how me and Arch are on our Falcons Audible podcast. Arch would get to talking about something.
Yeah.
And I would be like, look at my sheet. It's like the exact same thing.
Speaking the same language, same wavelength, all of it.
And sometimes you think the same and you have the same processes and you see it in the same way, and it just gives you that sense of comfort, like, I can give him that because I understand that he's thinking the same way I am, and we can get to the same outcome. And I think that's why people say, oh, he's young, he hasn't really done it. But yeah, he's probably done it thousands of times in practice. There's some things that people don't really realize sometimes in practice. A coach or an offensive coordinator say, hey, what? You got the play call this week. You're calling the plays in this game. You got this scrimmage. So they go through it a lot of times. Just because you haven't seen it maybe in the game don't mean it happened. But to have that same like-mindedness gives a coach a little comfort level that says, you know what? This guy's ready for this moment. And how is she going to be ready unless you get a guy a chance? So here we are.
Yeah.
And I think that's the piece that we tend to forget as fans, is that we think you say a guy's name and that's who he's going to be throughout his career. Okay, this is a young coach that got a chance to call plays last year. He's going to be exponentially better and more prepared this year. Tori makes a great point, and this is a different roster. There's different toys to play with. There's different problems to solve, no question. But he's more equipped to cover them and take care of them because of his experience, both in the practices and both what he got from the games last year. But I don't think you expect a player to be a better player next year, right? How many times do we talk about the first year to the second year, the guys get exponentially better? That's their biggest growth here. Well, that's essentially what Tommy Rees is going to do here. And the ace he's got in the hole is that the guy that's the head coach is an offensive coordinator. So it's not like he's got a defensive head coach or something like that he can't really lean on. He's got a guy there that's been that, done that, and so
Also,
I think
I'll say too, the staff overall, how many former offensive coordinators are now a part of this offensive staff?
For sure.
I think that matters to your point.
Yeah, and how important is it, Tori, too, that when you begin to come together as a staff, and that's why sometimes you hire guys off of your former staff, which Kevin's done, that there's a synergy between them, that they understand, not that there's a hierarchy, but there is a meeting of the minds as to how checks and balances work, and we get to a plan without arguing with one another how it's supposed to go. So that's an important deal as well.
You and Shock both mentioned it. Rees doesn't have a ton of reps, a ton of time as a play calling OC, so we will see what happens with him as they get acclimated. And go ahead.
No, you're leading me to where I wanted to go. The things that I'm hearing about Tommy Rees quickly, okay, and that's what the fan wants to hear really is, and I don't want to put too much on his plate, but in the National Football League, there's pressure attached to wherever you are.
Yeah.
Things I'm hearing about Tommy Rees and people that I've talked to around the league is young guys come from somewhere. And Kyle Shanahan came from somewhere. Sean McVay came from somewhere. Matt LaFleur came from somewhere. Those are the things from an innovative and that mind of being able to put things together are things that I'm hearing superficially now, and I'm starting to hear more and more of it about who Tommy Rees is and what he could potentially be. Now, you got to go prove it and get it done. That's what this game is about. You got to go get it done. But those are the kind of things I'm hearing about him.
Yeah, well, like I just said, Rees has not had a ton of experience with play calling. We'll see what happens later this year when the season starts. But someone who has had a lot of experience calling plays, being the defensive coordinator, none other than Jeff Ulbrich. Of course, the Falcons decided to retain him as the defensive coordinator, which I think a lot of fans and players were really excited about. Obviously, last year there were 5 draft picks. 4 of those were defensive guys that Ulbrich had a heavy hand in getting here. And 2 of them, at the time of this recording, are up for Defensive Rookie of the Year. They had amazing years. Why was it so important for Stefanski to retain Ulbrich for this defense?
I think you saw exactly what you needed to see as the season went on. You saw a defense continue to get better, but then you saw the versatility to be able to use all these different pieces that you have in this defense, a mix of young guys, a mix of veteran guys, but maybe use those guys in ways that allowed you to be successful. And the last 3, 4, 5 years, all we talked about is, how can we get to the quarterback? Can we find a way to get this guy on the ground? And you have, 57 sacks, a new franchise record, and you find ways to do it. You go back in the first round, you go get a guy named James Pierce, you get Jalen Walker. I mean, the way your defense played, the style in which you got after people, the way you made in-game adjustments, I thought was huge. I thought the way they have the ball hawks on the back end, you mix a veteran and Jesse Bates, and you also got a young guy in Billy Bowman who obviously got hurt, at the end of the year, but then Xavier Watts back there with Jesse was a huge piece to the puzzle as well. But bringing all those together, that's not easy. And I thought he did a really good job of blending what was already here and then adding pieces to it. And then you saw this defense continually get better. And then you hear around the league and you talk to people, you say, how hard was it to face this defense? What kind of stuff did you see? And you look at some of the biggest moments of the season on Monday night versus the Bills, or Monday night versus a guy who at the time may win the NFL MVP in Matthew Stafford. And you made those guys look really pretty mediocre or average in those ball games. So give them a lot of credit for finding ways to be just disruptive, but also you look around the league and you say, you know what, that Ulbrich defense is a lot to deal with.
I remember at the end of the year, I actually had the opportunity to interview Xavier Watts right after the LA game, and I was like, you guys have gone after MVP caliber quarterbacks all season long. Like, why is it so hard for offenses to compete against this defense? And he said, well, because we're all in connection together. We all know what everyone's supposed to be doing. And when we're all dialed together, it's really hard to stop. Something that I find interesting is Stefanski and Ulbrich have never worked together before. So knowing that, yes, when you are all like-minded and you all have the same vision, you're almost close to unstoppable, like Xavier was saying, for the defense. How do you expect for Stefanski and Ulbrich to kind of come together and create an unstoppable defense in a way?
I think it's actually going to be pretty easy. Yeah, I think because of the level of respect and knowledge that Jeff Ulbrich has. And I don't think that Kevin Stefanski would have retained him if he didn't think that this was what needed to happen for this staff. But when it comes to Jeff Ulbrich, I know I've had so many conversations with Brick just about his philosophy, what he thinks. And if this defense performed the way they did in year 1 with him, what can they look like in year 2? And I know a very obvious next step is improving in run defense and being more of a run-stopping force. You kind of, because of the attack style front of which they were implementing and also having some young guys wanting to get after the quarterback, you kind of did lose a little bit of that. I think that's understandable when you're asking guys to do what they were about to do. But year 2 is about growth. Year 2 is about continuing to solidify that you're one of the premier pass rushing units in the league while also not having a drop off in the other parts of the game. And so I think that with the Jeff Ulbrich retention, it's a chance to continue the work. Just point blank continue the work where you don't have to feel like you start over. There have been so many defensive coordinators in the 5 years that I've been here, so many different systems, so many things that I'll just use someone like Zach Harrison, who had so many different defensive coordinators, had to move all about the defensive line, depending on what each guy wanted from him. I would love to see continuity amongst this defense to improve and improve upon what they already have. And I think by retaining Jeff Ulbrich, you have the opportunity to see that happen.
Yeah, to that end, and I think it's really well stated, Tori, in that there's a lot of conversation about what's your culture, what are you supposed to, what's the big picture look like. You establish the picture with Ulbrich's defense. He established what it's supposed to look like, and they have things they can improve on. There's no question about that, and Brick will pound those in. But now all of a sudden, there's an expectation that we're supposed to get to the passer. There's an expectation in the back end, we take the football away. That's who we are. That's what we're made of. And that started last season, so the continuation so well stated that now that's what we expect to do. That's our bar. We're not going to settle for anything less. That's important that there's a baseline when you come here as a young player. You know, if you're a defensive tackle that's brought in here, I don't care if you're a veteran or not, Brandon Dorlus had 8.5 sacks. That he's expected to get after the passer. You know, we're going to get at it, and we do need to be better against the run. But there's an expectation level to me that you have to establish first, and they did that, and now you have that building block you move from.
Before we move on to Ian Cunningham, they also brought in Craig Aukerman as the special teams coordinator. This was also one of the glaring issues with the Falcons. A lot of the games that the Falcons did drop ended up being one-score games. So knowing where he's been and where he's succeeded, why is this a good move for Stefanski and his coaching regime?
I think for me, it's about, you know, he's coming in here with some decisions to make, some pretty big decisions, not unlike the offensive coordinator, not unlike Kevin Stefanski, just in general. Everybody's coming in here, and I don't think that there's anything that needs more of a jolt than special teams. And I am excited to see what he does within the decisions. The Falcons do have a conversation that they need to have about the kicking game. Like you said, there was too many things that happened in the kicking game in 2025 to feel really sure about the product going out there. But with Zane Gonzalez, the Falcons did find something there. Do you bring him back? If you don't, what connections does he have as a special teams coordinator with his previous experience to bring in somebody that, whether it be in the kicking game, whether it be in punt return, whatever the case may be, you need guys who can come in and move the needle for you. So how can he, as the coordinator, do that?
Yeah, I think the flashy piece is we get caught in the kicker. Obviously, a kicker's going to win and lose games for you in that particular moment. Obviously, there's other plays that lead to that moment. And then we think a kick returner. I think the brick and mortar pieces to it are the guys that are cover guys, the coverage units, the protection units, those type of things. There's got to be a want to there. A lot of those guys are your backup guys in different places. Now we have a few starters. Jalen Walker was covering kickoffs, you know, because you wanted to get better players on the field because we weren't doing that very well. It'll be interesting to see how he handles the personnel piece to it. And I'll be the first guy to advocate. You better have Josh Woods on this team. You know, I would say Josh Woods to me has the want to and the idea of what it's supposed to be to a special teams, and I think he will demand the guys around him play at that level. But there's some work to be done on the special teams.
Talk about personnel. You talk about bringing guys in, and there's one guy that can really make the phone calls and make that happen. That, of course, is Ian Cunningham, the newest general manager for the Atlanta Falcons, was named the general manager. January 29th was the last piece of the puzzle for the Falcons in this offseason of hirings. I mean, you guys, I don't know about y'all, but I've been pretty impressed with what I've heard from Ian Cunningham. Why do you guys believe that he is the correct choice and fit for the Falcons?
Yeah, he's Taylor. He's very calculated in how he answers questions, and obviously we can talk about where he came from, and it's very storied. And we talked about every rung along the way. Assistant personnel guy, a personnel guy in both college and pro, and then assistant GM all the way up the ladder, and the people he's worked with, the Ozzie Newsomes, the Howie Rosemans, all the different guys he's worked with, Ryan Poles, garnering that information, much like Kevin Stefanski and what Kevin Stefanski did. So their walk through this is very similar. They didn't skip any levels. They went through it, in fact, to the point where, and Shock will talk a little bit about this, where he's had a tough time of it. He got emotional at his press conference, how hard it's been to get to this place. It means something to him. But I think that his idea of how they build the team mirrored with Kevin and with Matt, in that, he loves draft picks. I'll let you guys talk about that. But I just love that he's a guy that has not skipped any steps. Yeah. He used to live here in Atlanta, was here kind of when times were really good for the Braves, when times were good for the Falcons. They went to the Super Bowl. He remembers how the city was there, so there's a feeling for him of a hometown kind of feeling, even though he didn't go to high school or anything. I just think it's pretty cool that he's got that feel for it. But I just love how calculated he is, Shock, and how he's a deep thinker about things. He's not quick to make decisions. Yeah. You know, I think that's something you have to be in a personnel scenario.
Yeah, when you hear him talk, the word calculate is good. And I think the word that comes to mind for me is when you hear him, there's like a hunger in his voice about this job. And Arch mentioned him getting to this point and going through all the different rungs. And he even talked about he thought he would be at this stage earlier. He thought he would be a GM sooner than he is now. And he said being skipped over for those spots, not having the opportunity to be a GM when he thought he was going to be a GM, he thought it hurt him a little bit. And for me, the family piece of it really hit home for me. And Arch talked about him being emotional, and he talked about those moments of not being the GM when he thought he should be. It showed his kids a lot about what it takes to overcome stuff, to go through the difficult times. But then, you know what? To keep your head down, to keep trekking, and to work hard, and guess where you sit now? And I think that speaks volumes about who he is and what he speaks to his kids about, that, you know what? This job is going to mean so much to him because he's got not just this entire organization and fan base wanting to do well, but he has kind of a sense of an obligation to his kids to show them, you know what? This is what happens when you persevere through tough times. Yeah. And it tells you exactly who he is as he goes through these particular moments, the first few days as a GM, and as he goes through the process, the detail-oriented part of it. And I think that's what matters the most is this guy is calculated, but he also has a vision for exactly what he wants. He talks about building through the trenches. Mm-hmm. Offensive lineman, played there, done it. What we want to do here, run the football. Arch talked about on the pod, hey, it's a team that ran the football pretty well last year. But building it through the trenches is where every step he's been at, whether it's Baltimore, Philly, back, wherever it is, they started in the trenches, and that's where they've been successful at it. But the thing that caught my attention the most was his ability to talk about, you know what, hey, I've been through some tough times. It hurt me. I cried about it. It stung me. But my kids looked at me, and I was able to show them that, hey, if you put your head down to work, that's what it's about. Because everybody talks about, hey, you can talk about it all you want. But they saw me go through it. They saw the action part of it. And I think that's what sticks out the most is that ability to have that inside him that he's not going to overstep anything when he gets here. Everything is going to be calculated.
Something I want to ask you about, Tori, kind of leaning into that of the, there were times in my career where I thought I deserved it and that was my time and I should have been the general manager. He's been in the league since 2008. That's the same amount of time. That's right when Matt Ryan started, right? And a little bit different, probably a different pay grade as well. Starting at a assistant and a franchise quarterback, probably a little bit different. But nonetheless, he's been in the league for a while, since 2008. Why is now the time for Ian Cunningham?
I think it goes back to, let's just talk about Ian Cunningham as an exec, as a decision maker, as a strategic mind. I think that because of the experiences that he had as a scout with the Baltimore Ravens organization, then moving on to be an executive leader in and of himself with director of scouting, all of those kind of things with Philly, then moving to an assistant GM role under Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears. I think that you can see why his philosophy is the way it is based on the stops and the people that he's worked with previously. Some of the big key things that I think philosophically he talked about was, we mentioned draft picks, love them, they're currency, they're what you need. He said that, he was like, I believe when I started with the Bears, we had 5 picks, ended up with 10 that year. I mean, that's a pretty significant movement. So you have that from a salary cap, construction standpoint and what you have to be compliant. He talked about not really wanting a lot of dead money and having to be creative and innovative in that way to figure things out. I believe he's even having a meeting with our salary cap people today. Yeah. So he's stepping right into it. You have restricted free agents, unrestricted free agents that you have to go out and figure out what you're going to do with them. And then, of course, just holistically, to your point, building through the trenches. You saw the Chicago Bears do that over the last 3 years through the draft and also through free agency to put together a unit that protected Caleb Williams. So I think that when...
Yeah, ran it to the level of number 3 in the league rushing the football.
There you go. That also counts. So I think when you look at what Ian Cunningham is, you have to look at what his philosophical thoughts are with roster building, with roster construction. And I think when you listen to all the things that he said to all of us over the last 24 hours since he was introduced, those are the main buckets of things that he has learned over the course of his career.
Yeah.
Going from, and it goes back to, sorry, Arch, to what you were saying about what Matt Ryan said about Kevin Stefanski, that hire, was that there was this like experience level of his entire lived coaching experience. You can say the exact same thing about Ian Cunningham. His entire lived front office experience, touching every single level from scouting to being a director, to being a part of pro personnel, to being an assistant GM. This is somebody who has a wide range of knowledge as to how to construct a front office and a roster, and I think that's important.
I thought it was funny when I asked Ryan, I said, I don't know how you guys could, Ryan was at BC, Boston College, and Ian was at University of Virginia, UVA. Same conference, okay? And so I looked at Ryan's stats, and Ryan played, I think, 5 games his freshman year. But I kept looking for Virginia. I said, you guys never played Virginia. You guys never faced each other on the same field in the same conference. He looked over at Ian and he said, they couldn't make it to the championship.
That is called competitive spirit.
That is cool. We've mentioned it a couple of times, the 3 teams that he has been with: Baltimore Ravens, the Philadelphia Eagles, most previously the Chicago Bears. In that time, he's won 2 Super Bowls, been to 11 playoff appearances. That's a lot of times in the playoffs. That's a lot of playing late in January as well. But you have all mentioned that his biggest philosophy is starting in the trenches, working out. He mentioned it yesterday in his press conference. They started in his first year at Chicago with 5 picks, elevated that to 10. He did not promise that with the Falcons that we will have 10 picks at the end of April. But what he did say was right now, Falcons are sitting at 5 picks. It sounds like to me, you guys, this guy knows how to create a winning roster, how to create an aggressive roster, because he is aggressive himself, whether it is through free agency or through the draft for you. Looking at what you know about Ian Cunningham, why is it important to have an aggressive yet smart general manager?
Well, I think the first thing is you put together, whenever you try to do something, regardless if it's something we're doing and we've got a game plan here that we go by, right? Stefanski's going to put together, Coach Stefanski's going to put together a game plan. They have a script that they go by for practice. The reason I mention that is essentially what's happened here with the melding of these minds, with Matt Ryan bringing these 2 guys together and their idea of what they want to be offensively, first of all. And now you give Ian Cunningham a game plan. This is what we need to do from a personnel standpoint. Now, in the coming weeks, they're going to dive into this roster and evaluate this roster top to bottom as to how it fits. Shock talked about this on our pod on Falcons Audible about now you got to marry some of these ideas with what's on the roster, what don't you have, and those kind of things. And so that'll be the next piece of business as they evaluate salary cap, like you're talking about, Tori. But his idea of, okay, here's your game plan. This is what we need to do. Because Matt's been very clear. GM's going to do GM stuff. The head coach is going to do head coaching stuff. I'm going to be up here to be supportive and analyze, ask questions, all those kind of things to make sure we're stay in the right direction. But I think the plan is very clear for Ian. And like you said, he came in and immediately was in meetings. He's in meetings like we talked about right now about salary cap and those kind of things. But I think that the game plan piece of it and having an idea of that idea is a positive step.
I think, too, like you talk about getting right in and putting feet to the ground and hitting it, but it's because you have to.
Yeah.
This thing is not slowing down. You have to have decisions made about Kyle Pitts, Tyler Algier, Caden Ellis. These are some of these free agents.
No doubt.
You have to have an idea of what you're going to do at the quarterback position. I know we've kind of alluded to it. We've made mention of it. But the fact of the matter is no one painted themselves into a corner when specifically asked about Michael Penix in the future of whether or not he'll be the starter day one. He's still attacking his rehab. That's what everybody has said. That's been the line. And I think that when you look at what Ian Cunningham has to do, you have to have these conversations, and those conversations are happening right now. It's why they didn't paint themselves into a corner, him or Kevin Stefanski, because they haven't had those conversations yet. You can't make a declarative statement on who's going to be the quarterback in week one when you haven't had the conversation yet. So I'm really curious to see all of the dominoes that fall here, because there's a lot of big dominoes that have to fall. Also, that's not even talking about how you have to build depth at wide receiver, cornerback, defensive tackle. I mean, there are so many things that Ian Cunningham now has on his plate with a new roster, a new coaching staff that, I mean, I'm excited to get into this offseason because we get to have those answers.
Taylor, I think he might have said this to you, but I remember him saying, I guess he had been here 3 days or whatever by his press conference, and it might have been the Monday night or might have been after the presser. He had said he'd already sent all his coordinators. He had sent Stefanski a text about what they want to do next. Here's what we want to talk about. Here's our next meeting. Here's what I'm already looking forward to doing. Oh, he ain't waiting to next week to get this going. He's already in the process of talking to these guys about what's next on his brain. He's just like, all right, I sent that out. I had to think about it right then. I wanted to get it out to him. But that tells you where his brain is. That tells you that his mind is already thinking about how can we get this team better today. Not worried about, when free agency rolls around or Monday when we start draft. I got stuff on my mind. I'm letting them know right now.
Well, and the beauty of this league is even the 2 teams that are going to play in the Super Bowl, come Monday, there are 32 teams that are trying to do the same.
No doubt.
Right? Everybody's going to say, wait a minute, we got a hole here. We got to fix that. That guy's contract's up. So everybody dives into it. But the thing we like about it is we get a little bit of head start with our crew. And by the way, and Tori, tell us the time frame on you get extra time now because you got a new regime. The OTAs start, 2 weeks earlier?
Yeah, April 7th, I believe, is when they're going to start. Yep.
So hitting the ground running is definitely what they're doing because they'll immediately be in meetings and those type of things and ultimately have guys on the field much earlier than other teams.
Tori, you kind of gleaned to it earlier, so let's kind of talk about it. There are a lot of things coming up in the offseason of the NFL. That's why I love the NFL, because it's really a year-round sport for the fans.
Never
There's always
stops.
something going on. So for you guys, what are you most excited to see, to be part of, to see what happens in this offseason? The draft, the combine, the scouting combine, free agency as a whole, OTAs. What are you most excited for? I'll start with you, Arch.
Shock's really excited about the schedule release.
I can't wait. I mean, locked in on it.
International game. We're
Everything, man. All in on it.
National game. I think it's probably the next thing, Taylor, to be honest with you. I think we all kind of get in the football mindset that you can't put the cart before the horse. And so I think that all of us kind of fall into the football concept of what's the next game? What's next up? And so combine coming up. First of all, prior to that will be player evaluation for the next 2 or 3 weeks. They're going to be looking at, as Tori talked about, salary cap and how do players fit, who we want to bring back, who do we not want to bring back, and how does that marry up with, and then you blend that with going up and looking at the college talent. And then 2 weeks later, you've got to make a decision on those guys and get those guys signed if you can.
You want to explain salary cap to everybody, how that works?
Absolutely.
We do not have the time. We do not have the time.
It's on dead money.
We do not have the time. Not today.
But so to answer your long answer to your question, Taylor, I think it's the next thing up. And for me, I'll be interested to hear kind of in and out of some meeting rooms and things like that as we walk the hallways here, where we at as far as evaluating the roster, and then we'll dive into the combine.
Yeah, I think for me, it's as much as I don't want to skip over the combine, you always have multiple things going on in the brain at the same time. And I really am, I alluded to this earlier, I really am thinking that this free agency period and the decisions that the Falcons ultimately make are going to be the guiding light for how they move forward into the rest of the offseason. Like I said, they have a lot of decisions to make about key contributors. I know I named someone like Caden Ellis. Think about what Caden Ellis has been for this defense over the last few years that he's been here and what he's meant to Jeff Ulbrich's system even in this past year. And you talk about Tyler Algier. He can go be probably an RB1 somewhere. Can the Falcons figure out a way to keep him here, though, because of what he has with Bijan Robinson and also just from this offense collectively as a whole? Kyle Pitts, are they going to put a franchise tag on him? Like, these are the questions that I think, like, these are the dominoes, because once a decision is made on some of those guys, it gives me more of an understanding of what direction they're going in regards of the draft, in regards of who they're going after in free agency, who are they re-signing, who's going to be a part of this roster. Once I know that, I'll be able to have more of an understanding at the combine, post-combine of the direction that this team's going to go in. And I've said this multiple times on radio, written form, wherever, podcasting. If finding a head coach and a general manager for the Falcons this year was decision 1A, 1B is what you're going to do at the quarterback position. And I'm sure we could have a whole round table on that. There are no decisions that have been made yet. Kirk Cousins is still under contract. He reportedly had his contract restructured. There's a March 13th financial deadline of sorts where you kind of want to make a decision.
Did you not hear what happened? They already said they
Oh, did they?
Arch is coming back. You didn't.
Arch is coming back. Arch is coming back.
You didn't get
That.
Unless they
I was gonna let him break it, but he
I mean, I'm looking at all three.
so throw in immediately, we'll be in trouble.
Yeah.
This is incredible. He is a legend after all.
Yeah, we lose that term very easily. The Michael Penix conversation, and it's one that might have to do one of these on. Michael's working his rear enough, as you talked about, to get himself ready. So part of the answer to Michael and where he's going to be, there's no question he's going to be on this roster and he's going to have a chance to potentially compete for the job or be the guy. I thought there's no question about that. So don't think, okay, he's not going to be the quarterback because you don't know that. It's very likely he will be the quarterback. Can he be ready by the time the season starts? He's highly regarded. Yeah. He was highly regarded by everybody that's in the building now and prior to. He was a guy that was, there's 2 or 3 teams that I know were upset with the Falcons that the Falcons took him where they did because they were going to draft him a couple of picks later. So he's still highly regarded that much. And let's not forget, the guy's only played, what has he played, Tori? 12 games, 13 games? Mm-hmm. So there's an uncertainty as to just how much better he could be. And I think that that's a pretty high ceiling. So he's doing everything he can do to help you make that decision. And that's what he needs to do. Help me make the decision. I remember as a player, I don't know if you ever heard this, Shock, you make the decision for me.
For sure.
You go play, you get ready, and you make the decision for you. That's what Michael's trying to do right now.
Yeah, I think too, like in the offshoot of that, the other side of the coin is you have to have a contingency plan in place in the event he's not. Because let's be honest, like no one knows what that recovery timeline is, and basically the doctors.
For sure.
It's the doctors who know, and so I think if you're talking about inserting a new scheme, new terminology, how quickly can he get his feet under him physically as well as mentally? Like all of these things are going to kind of come to a head in August for training camp, in July, in September when the season starts. So you have to have a best case scenario, you have to have a okay case scenario, and you got to have a worst case scenario. And whatever that is, it's up to these decision makers that we've spent the last 40 minutes talking about. It's up to them to make that decision and put those plans in place.
The conversation is now.
Yeah.
They're having it. And fans that know it, they understand it. It's a part of the game. It's a business. We all have seen this over the years, and it's the reality of where we are. We all want Michael Penix to be ready to go, but as we know, you never know what happens later. So
and some of that will continue to grow as he tries to absorb begins to absorb the offense. 100%. One of the toughest things for a quarterback is to flush an old system out of your mind and put in a new system, because a lot of times terms are very similar, right? And they mean something completely different in a new system. So, but the beauty of it is, Tori just told us they get 2 weeks, I think, 2 weeks earlier than most teams. He's going to have a chance to sit in some meetings just with the coach or with Tommy Rees, say, here's what we want to do. And this is what we're thinking about doing. Now you get up on the board and draw it, and you tell me where you're going. And so he's going to be able to do the mental part of it as he's getting physically ready to go, as Tori talked about.
Well, there's a lot of questions about this team moving forward, but now that there's a new president of football, a new head coach, new general manager, most of those questions, are going to be answered here in the next couple of months as we get the combine going and free agency and even the draft as well. All of those questions will most likely be answered by week 1 of the season, right all the way down in September. We'll probably be back with you guys later in the offseason as some of those answers, or some of those questions get answered.
We're just so excited for the answers.
We're excited for the answers. We will be probably having another couple roundtables during this offseason time. Thank you guys for joining us for another edition of the Roundtable. See you guys next time.